Since the Black Lives Matter protests swept the country following the death of George Floyd, some state Republican lawmakers are passing stricter protest laws.
It is the strongest anti-rioting, pro-law enforcement piece of legislation in the country. And there's just nothing even close. It tackles head-on this idea that we've seen last summer and then we still see today, that there should be a movement to defund law enforcement. Now, obviously, the state of Florida, we're not going to do that under my leadership.
We've seen just time and time again lawmakers responding in particular to specific protest movements, not by engaging with the concerns that have turned protesters out, but by introducing this kind of restricted legislation. Since the killing of George Floyd, we've tracked over 90 bills introduced by lawmakers in 35 states that would undermine the right to peacefully assemble and protest.
In the United States, you have the right to assemble and peacefully protest against the government as you see fit. The First Amendment of the Constitution allows you to assemble and engage in peaceful protests in public space, like sidewalks, streets, public squares, and parks. Also, it's already illegal to engage in violence and in property destruction, but what these bills are doing is sending a message to protesters.
I mean, when you're talking about laws that create these expansive new criminal offenses so that individuals can be caught up in charges, in many cases, not even by virtue of their own conduct, but by virtue of what's happening in the crowd around them. You combine that with the potential for facing really life-altering penalties, criminal penalties, and I think it's likely to really, as a practical matter, chill individuals' desire to engage in protests.
A Washington Post analysis counted over 10,000 distinct protest events across the country last summer and found them overwhelmingly peaceful.
The overwhelming majority of protests associated with the anti-racism uprising of 2020 resulted in no property destruction and no injuries to police or others. I think the bottom line takeaway is that the depiction of Black Lives Matter and of the anti-racism uprising more generally as kind of a violent riot is not supported by the evidence.
The conversations about changes in policing are still in the forefront as a wave of police reform measures popped up across the country, including in the District, Maryland, and Virginia. D.C. specifically introduced legislation for police conduct during demonstrations. The law requires officers to have visible identification, limits the use of less than lethal weapons, and bans the use of chemical irritants. The law also prohibits police from being deployed in riot gear unless there is an immediate risk to officers of significant injury. But the bills in Florida, Iowa, and other states make it harder to protest without penalty.
Pay attention. We've got new law, and we're going to use it if you make us.
And the bills are also unique in the sort of extreme lengths they go to restrict and chill protest rights. And in many cases, it is clear that they are targeting racial justice protesters because these are provisions that target, in particular, street protests, whether it's by increasing penalties for protesters who block traffic or by creating new protections for drivers who hit protesters with their cars, among other provisions.
Peaceful protests are a good thing. They're a healthy thing. But when they spill onto the roadway and then when they happen violently, we have to address that and say, no.
They feel like there's imminent harm, and that's what the bill does. It gives them immunity to get out of the situation if imminent harm is there.
Connor Gibson is researching who has been supporting these types of bills since the death of Floyd.
There are at least 12 states, probably more, where police unions, officers, sheriff's associations, or other law enforcement advocacy groups are supporting various anti-protest bills, mostly the kinds of bills that expand the definition of a riot and increase penalties, as well as some that have to do with traffic obstruction and monuments.
He says these are underestimates because of disclosure of who is behind the bill is not very good in some states.
In addition, there are at least 19 states where legislators that are sponsoring these anti-protest bills are themselves current or former law enforcement officers. And that is a trend I don't think we've examined very much as a nation.
These bills are also raising red flags among First Amendment experts because they undermine the right to peaceful assembly. Days after becoming law, an Orlando civil rights attorney challenged Florida's new anti-riot law in court.
And this, quite frankly, may end up in front of the Supreme Court at the end of the day. These are pieces of legislation which begin to trample on one of the most fundamental rights that we enjoy here in America.
I think that there will be many challenges to the total onslaught of peaceful assembly rights that is taking place right now across the country in dozens of legislatures. We also know that during the last administration, there was kind of a record number of justices appointed by the Trump administration. And so I think there is some question about the degree to which those judges will kind of adhere to First Amendment standards or whether they will interpret the First Amendment in narrow ways or in ways that, basically prohibit certain types of gatherings.